I'd like to share a story today from David Feldman, the author, where he talks about a lion tamer who has a conversation with a student of his. And he asks the student, what is most important when you're trying to tame a fierce lion? Is it the four-legged stool or is it the whip? And the student thought for a minute and said, Master, surely it's the whip to take care of the lion. And the master said, not at all. It's actually the four-legged stool. You see, a lion is a ferocious animal that can pounce on you so quickly. But when you hold up a four-legged stool in front of him, he gets confused. He doesn't know what to go after. He can only focus on one thing at a time. So he's frozen and can't do anything when he sees all of these options in front of him. I share that story because I think that's so much of what we do as individuals in our society. We get so overwhelmed. We have so many messages in our life. I think the last time I've heard a stat, it's been years, but I'm sure it's similar, that we see over 2,000 advertisements a day, the average person does. We're so inundated with technology and things that were going on in our home life and at work, that if we can learn to simplify things, whether you're someone like me in sales or you're in business, when you're talking to somebody, communicating at home with your children, the more we can simplify things into one key point, the much more likely it's going to be heard and remembered. I think especially, I sell a product right now in dermatology. I'm not going to give the name of the product, but it's for hyperhidrosis, which is excess sweating. And there are so many great benefits of this product. But if I go into a doctor's office and have that 30 seconds that I often have in front of them and try to tell them on the three main points, the age restriction and the benefits and how long it's going to last and how quick it's going to work, and oh, by the way, here's a potential side effect, they're not going to remember any of this. Think about what they're going through. They're seeing all these patients up to now. They've got so many more patients they're trying to catch up with. They've got things going on at home. They have nurses calling to them. They've had other drug reps that are talking to them. And if you try to give these multiple messages, it's going to get lost. And think about that in your work or at your home when you're talking to your spouse, you're talking to your kids. Think about how often you want to tell them so many things that are multiple you want them to remember. But if you could do one thing at a time, it's much more likely to stick. It's like the old terminology, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. That's there because it's hard to comprehend more than one thing at a time. I like what Pastor Andy Stanley focuses often in his sermons, and I'll share what he talks about, and I'll paraphrase what he says. Andy often will say that I believe in Jesus because anybody that can predict their own death and resurrection and then actually pull it off, I'm going to believe whatever that person says. You see, he's the only one in all the faiths, all the religions that actually rose from the dead and is still living today. He does not have a gravestone like everybody else. Hence, I believe in the Old Testament because Jesus believed in the Old Testament. We have so many eyewitnesses from the Gospels and Paul and Peter, his own brother. And so James, his own brother. We have all these examples of people who died their own death because of what they witnessed, and they knew what he said was true. And I think in our faith, we often try to confuse things when we're talking to people and over-explain what it means to be a Christian and what our faith is about. And there's time for this. We have to go into more depth and know this. But let's start off with keeping it simple. When Jesus was asked, it was Matthew 22, 36 through 34. So this was his disciple Matthew recorded this. And the Pharisees were asking him, Teacher, what is the greatest commandment? And you see, he started off with something they already knew. He goes, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. And he goes, Jesus said, this is the first and the greatest commandment. You see, the people back then, the Jewish people knew, yes, this was taught in the Old Testament. We knew the law and the prophets talked about this being the greatest commandment. And yes, Jesus, you were right. But see, he had this slight pause, but Jesus kept going. And the second is like this. Wait a second. What do you mean the second? This is where Jesus always knew more and knew how to talk to them in a way that nobody ever had. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and the prophets, everything, they had created not only the 10 commandments, they had created over 600 commandments over time that they had to follow. It became a rules-based society within the Jewish nation. But he was taking it down to one single commandment. Love God with all your heart, love others as you love yourself. Everything comes down to these main points. So I'm going to ask you today, can you keep your life, your faith, love God, love people? If we start there, Everything else we can build on that, expand. But start there. Keep things simple at home and in your business, and just watch how much more people remember what you're saying. Have a great day.